Hello and welcome to Best for Women Live. I'm your host, Brooke Gordon, and joining us today is Natalie Williams from the Esteem Agency. Super excited to have her come on today because we're going to be talking about all things related to, success. So as Natalie comes online, we are really excited to be having this conversation because I think now more than ever, it's something that's really needed. So Natalie, welcome. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Technology there. This is what happens. You get button crazy and you start touching. Okay, I'm attached, I'm connected. But I'm glad to be here on this, I guess, holiday Monday. Are you still having a great long weekend?
Oh, so far it's been extremely restful. How about you?
That's great. Same here. Really encouraged to have an extra day off.
I hear that entirely. So Natalie, tell us a little bit about the Esteem Agency and yourself, and then we're going to dig in more into the topic of client relations.
Sure. Thanks, Brooke. So the Esteem Agency was birthed out of working corporately for many, many, many years and recognizing that many non-for-profits, financial institutions, corporations had the same challenge. They put a lot of money into customer acquisition and not enough into retention, whether it was a program, budget lines. And after working in so many different business sectors, I realized I can offer this service in terms of the learnings I had corporately and when I was working with non-for-profits on how best to incorporate, organizational effectiveness and customer success into their fulfillment processes so they can ensure that their clients are getting their desired outcomes.
Okay, I love this, but I'm going to pause for a second. What is a fulfillment process?
So the fulfillment process looks different for any company, but when you're selling something to a client or a customer, the process in which they get that product and service is the fulfillment process. So if you think about, you're at the drive-in, you tell the person on the other end what you want, but somehow when you get your bag, everything you said through the teleprompter is not in your bag. Or a multitude of things. That's probably a little bit of a silly example, but it really differs for each company. But the essential thing you need to take away is that the fulfillment process is part of the main premise of the retention. It's not good enough just to have a great product or service. It's how the client actually utilizes that, which is tied back to their value and how they want to use your product or service is really how you retain them.
Oh, okay. I love this. We're going to dig deeper into this, but tell me a little bit about customer relations in your areas. Like, what does it mean to you? What is customer relation? We're starting to dig into sort of the fulfillment side, but let's take it back up just a little bit.
So, I mean, client relations can mean a lot of things to a lot of people, but for me, it's about how you nurture the positive relations with the customer. So it will be the sum of all your interactions and your experiences that your customer experiences, but that is client relations. You want to be seen as a trusted advisor.
I love that. So communication, we're talking about email, we're talking about face-to-face, we're talking about and it wasn't a silly example. I think it was really a clear example because many of us have gone through the drive-through to order food. And you do have that moment where you sort of hear this echoey squawk and you're hoping that you understood the question because you sort of have this routine and you think that you know. And then you're going to share your order. And then the next thing that comes back is, okay, well, did they understand my order? Am I paying for the right thing? And then you've got a window where you get to review, you get to pay. And then you go to a completely different window where they hand you a bag and you hope that what's in it is what you just ordered, right? And so this is all just a good illustration of the fact that there's many touch points that we have. And then add on to that maybe there's an app, right, asking you to scan a QR code for points, or maybe an app prompting you, and that's what made you stop there in the first place. So all these little pieces, I think it was a really great illustration.
Yeah, no, that is kind of like turnkey and what you hope a lot of big brands have been able to figure out how to do. But, with the great service model that I have in working B2B, so working with corporations and businesses to develop strategies around this, is very proactive. So if I use the example of any fast food chain, I would really be talking to them about the workflow in which they need to consider things from the customer's perspective. A lot of times organizations, they focus on the efficiency. So I've given you your food quickly. That has little to nothing to do with the fact that the things I ordered are not in the bag.
Are right or wrong, right?
Exactly.
What I want is when you hand me the bag, you don't just say, here's your order. I want you to tell me what's in the bag so that I don't have to open it and now risk everything that was wonderfully packed being spilled out everywhere while I'm driving, right?
That's right. And so, when you talk about B2B, a lot of companies have an opportunity to strategically think about their proactive approach. As I mentioned earlier, I've worked corporately for many years, and I have recently stopped drinking that Kool-Aid as I am on my own as a professional contractor now. But in that time, it didn't matter whether I was working for a major retail conglomerate, well-known international executive coaching firm, or a professional conference firm that are really putting insights out there in conferences for thought leaders to come together. All those different business sectors, you still have an opportunity to strategically think about who is your customer. In the way of a conference firm, it might be a sponsor. For fundraisers people who are in the non-for-profit space or charities, it could be a donor. Mm-hmm. And then for many organizations, it's paid customers, whether you have a product or service. All those different business sectors still have the issue of client retention and how they approach client retention and workflows and the process of fulfillment is how they can essentially ensure that they have retention. Again, I can't emphasize enough that efficiency and how quickly you check a box in terms of your to-do list, a lot of time has little to nothing to do with whether the customer actually received value.
Oh, that's really powerful. And I want to sort of maybe flip this sideways as to why it's so important. So one of the things that I love to talk about and super important from a business perspective is cash flow, right? We talk about cash flow being, you insert your pronoun, king, queen, however you want to describe it. But I think it's, we also hear, cash is the lifeblood of the business, but it's actually not, in my opinion, because cash is really about a transaction of value. I value what you have, and I am going to give you something that's a common currency in exchange for that value. And at the end of the day, if the client's not satisfied, then they're not going to pay, or they're not going to come back, or they're not going to tell their friends to come back. So for me, the lifeblood is really the client experience.
Yes, you described that, really, really well. At the end of the day, even though every company aims for their client to have their desired outcome, the process in which they get that desired outcome is just equally as important as the outcome. And, this day and age, what sets a lot of companies apart is them taking the time to look at their entire business as a 360 customer-centric perspective. So, everybody wants to make the numbers, everybody wants to think about revenue. And, one of the main value propositions on starting the Esteem Agency is that, again, that equation between customer acquisition and retention costs. And so if you have, I think the stat now is closer to 8 times, but, you have to spend 5 to 8 times more money to acquire a new customer.
Okay, that's really significant. But I think it also really ties in with some of the things that we're seeing, where I'm hearing in some of the panels I've moderated and other interviews that people are finding, especially small business, they're almost getting edged out of the market of paid advertising because they can't afford it anymore. Because some of the, I'll say, larger brands with bigger budgets have started to figure out how they go from like big banner ads and TV ads. And now that media is shifting to social media, they've come on social media with their budgets, which in turn is really pushing smaller businesses out of the budget. So this is, what I'm hearing is really consistent, that it is costing more to get in front of a client than it used to.
Yeah, it most certainly is. And whether you're a sole practitioner, a small business, those numbers are more or less the same. Now, the interesting thing about the example you gave, yes, the big boxes, those big guns, they may have a lot more budget, but at the end of the day, how much of that is net retention rates in terms of revenue that they're keeping. So, another thing that comes up a lot in client relations is churn rates. So if you look at the amount of customers that you might lose because something wasn't fulfilled, they weren't happy, or in some cases, they just weren't a good fit, that has little to nothing to do with the net retention of the clients that you do have that spend more money with you. So when you talk about some of those companies spending big, money in ads, that number and them acquiring new customers has nothing to do with how much revenue that they're actually making from the customers that they have because of that continuous legacy satisfaction. So I think a lot of people, and the rat race, we talk about this all the time, Brooke, I have a pipeline of 1,000 people. You only retain 4 of them. So,
yep. Who cares?
You might be, depending on your business model, you might be comfortable with the one and done. But this day and age, even if you have a business model where you're not looking to have reoccurring revenue, it's kind of a la carte. You have a experience with a customer, they're happy with your product and service, they're moving on. But there's the post things that you want to come out of that. You want them to continuously be a cheerleader for you, regardless if they're still working directly with your product or not. And if the fulfillment process was a nightmare, even though they eventually got the value out of whatever they purchased from you, they're not going to champion you to other people. They're not going to do written or video testimonials for you if it was a little choppy, even though they got the bare minimum of the return on investment. And so, again, it's a real 360 approach in terms of client centricity. Lots of companies just think about the efficiency. They don't think about the long-term impact of their interactions with their customers.
Oh, okay. There's a lot that I want to dig out of that. So one of the things that I heard you say is, this idea of churn, right? Which is basically you had a client and they left, or you had someone in the pipeline and they left. That is actually a positive thing, right? They didn't get to this stage of you investing even more in their experience. They realized they weren't a fit, or that the values weren't aligned. And actually, that's where you really want that bounce to happen. You don't want it to happen necessarily after you've started that engagement, after you're investing your resources, your people, your hands, your money in fulfillment.
That's right. Let's just pretend for, argument's sake, let's play devil's advocate.
Yeah.
Because again, this is what happens with a lot of organizations, and this is what I consult them about. The sales team, God love them, they have quotas. They're sold the product or service, sometimes to a customer that's not a good fit. Part of the client relations and a little bit of customer success best practices is really listening to the customer to determine their needs, figure out how they want to use your product and service, which is kind of a little bit more deeper into unpacking what the sales agreement was really all about, right? And so once you do that, while the initial approach that maybe the salesperson or the client may have had about how they best should use their product or service, through onboarding, through feedback calls, through reviews, you get more insight as to how a client wants to use a product or service. So you have to be agile. Sometimes it's not always as obvious that a certain product or service should be used in such a way for a client. But the more you build a rapport with them and build the trust and understanding that you're there to serve their needs, you're able to discover what those things are. And probably most importantly, this day and age is customize and personalize your approach to how best they should use your product or service. And this is definitely the case right now for SaaS companies. So everybody understands, software is a subscription. You bought the software with a certain intent, but after speaking with a customer service relations manager or a customer success manager, you get more insights on how best to use that product to really achieve the desired outcome of what you're trying to go for, whatever the goal and objective is for that particular organization or company.
Okay, what you just said landed in a couple of different ways for me. So I'm going to pin the thoughts, but I want to dig into them with you. Product is the one that first came to mind as I'm listening to you, because sometimes there's a product that you buy and you may not have a lot of interaction. It might be more transactional. And then what companies find is that people are using their product for a hack, right? It's something completely unintended use or some extreme use that they hadn't anticipated. And so here it's paying attention to that post transaction, what are people doing with your products? Because you want to make sure that your, I'll say, liability and your, whether it's insurance or whatever that's going to look like from a liability perspective, has taken that into consideration. And the second piece is that a new product line that you had never considered, or a new way of expressing the value of the product that you had never considered?
That's
Have
right.
you ever run into that from a product hack perspective?
I mean, sometimes, and by the time I get involved after working with the sales team, my role is to still drive what the agreement really entails. So if the product was purchased and there's some confusion on whether it's a good fit and how they should use it, actually, let me just look at my notes here. So when you talk about delivering value, in my opinion, there's tangible and intangible. The tangible is all the stuff that we talk about all the time, the data, which gives you the metrics, which gives you the insights. So you can actually comprehensively speak to the things that are fact, statistics, right? Dare I say the hard skills, right?
Yep.
And generally speaking, you can show the value in that. But the intangible, which I like to lean into quite a bit, because you're talking about the soft skills, the intangible, but it's also human skills, right? So how did you proactively communicate with them? Did you have value add check-ins? Not to be confused with just checking in for checking in's sake, right? How's the product going? Fine. That is not a value add. Oh, did you know when I check in with you? Let's use a TV, for example. There's an upgrade. There's a new software download that you can use for a smart TV that you should be aware of. That is more of a value add opposed to just checking in with your client. Lots of companies do that. The multitude of emails you get talking about the product or service you bought 3 weeks ago. But what is the value add in reaching out to a client to communicate with them is really what you want to focus on. And also, what other wins and things can you celebrate with the customer that goes beyond the product or service that they actually purchase? A lot of the companies I work with, they also have other incentives, initiatives that impact their overall revenue. And so sometimes it's really good for customer success or client relationship manager to know about those aspects as well. Is there succession for a new CEO coming into play? Yeah, we probably should know about that. Is there been a new version of a product that we're selling? We have the 1.0, we're coming up with 1.2. That will probably be important for your legacy people. So there's other information that you should always gather that will help a customer use a product and or service, depending on the cadence in which you're working with them.
Okay, can I give an example to make sure that I'm getting this correctly? So I'm a raving fan of Cheekbone Beauty lipstick. And I had a chance to meet owner and founder, Jennifer Harper, complete fangirl moment, took a photo, the whole thing. And so for me, being on camera, this lipstick is almost like an armor for me. Like, I feel very confident when I wear it. I feel like my lips are very obvious. For anyone who's lip reading, it's a little bit easier to see because my lip tone is very close to my skin tone. And so my natural lip tone. And so one of the things that came out of that is I follow her on social media. I get her, occasionally get her email newsletters. Although for me, in all fairness, a lot of things that are sent as a general email go into a general email folder and don't always get viewed. But they are releasing a new product. But more importantly, they had a new distribution channel. So they're now available in Sephora, which is amazing because there's one near me. Right. So now it was, the value add is I don't have to order online per se. I can go into a store, see the colors in person, and now I can pick a new color. So that for me was a huge value add because now she's got a new distribution channel. Am I sort of capturing like a value add? Okay, beautiful.
Not only are you capturing it, that's directly tied to revenue. Because whatever way that you were getting this lip color that you adore previous to this, now you have information on how you can get it consistently, which generally speaking, in terms of basket size, whether you're doing it online or doing it in the bricks and mortar, increases the amount of times that you'll purchase that product. So the value add is being informed and being informed in a proactive manner. I'm sure you didn't want to hear that after you bought that online at maybe a slightly higher price, opposed to going into your local Sephora store, etc. But the proactiveness clearness in communicating that will either save a client time, money, and effort is always going to be perceived as value add.
I love that. And not to use cheekbone beauty as an example, but hypothetically, there's times when you can buy something online, you hit a minimum purchase, minimum basket order for free shipping, right? Very common strategy, which is very different from being able to go in store where now it's my time. I've driven there, I've walked in, I've spent time looking around, sampling things. And so I am probably going to invest, independent. I'm not thinking about a basket. I'm not looking for that one extra order for the sake of fulfilling a basket. I'm now buying things that I'm really excited about, excited to try. And it's going to, so maybe not more experimentation, but more likely to come out really excited and talking about what it is that I've purchased because I've spent time playing, if that makes sense.
That's right. And then the more you talk about it, so it's like that cardinal rule, unfortunately, when people don't have a good experience, they tell everybody. But sometimes when folks have a great experience, they don't tell enough people. But if that impact was value add enough, anybody else that you know wants to experience the same thing that you do, you're more than likely to share that with them.
Yeah, like on a podcast. So I love that. There's something else that you talked about that I wanted to tip into, which is as an organization gets larger and you have a distinct and defined sales team separate from the fulfillment team, you can start to get this silo and divide. And I'm seeing your head nod on this. And so there can be, I'll say, promises made by the sales team that sometimes don't match how things get delivered. Okay. So tell me a little bit about, different ways that companies might be able to have more alignment between sales and fulfillment as they start to grow and scale, or once they've scaled and are large.
Ooh, it's my favorite topic.
Oh, excellent.
Well, because it speaks to organizational effectiveness in internal processes, which obviously the customers don't have visibility to. I guess what I'll do is, first of all, I'll tell you some of the tactics that I share with companies. And what they're most pleasantly surprised by, it doesn't cost anything, okay? Because a lot of the naysayers in the room, when you come up with new strategies to make sure that there is less siloedness and more collaboration in dare I say, cooperation, is the fact that it's gonna cost us more money if we do this or that. So the first thing with any sales model, it doesn't matter what business you're in, you should be doing a sales handoff, right? So when the salesperson is finished working with the client, you should know the who, what, where, so all the W's and the how, right, about that client, and any other additional insights that will help you with potentially an onboarding process, where you are now unpacking the sales agreement as it relates to how close can you get them to their desired outcome. So a lot of the things that we had discussed even in passing during this conversation. So who, a brand ABC, part of the who is their CEO is coming out. The new CEO is coming in, and this is their approach and philosophy as to how they market their product or service. That's going to be obviously important for you to know, right? Also, too, when you do handoffs, where is that information being housed internally? I like to use the terminology a doctrine. Some people say the Bible and this, that, but where is your space of your moment of truth, where it's consistent, it has all the information that you'll ever need to know about the client, who's interacting with them, data points that come out of their, let's say it's a SaaS company, their usage. If it's a donor, how many times throughout the day, throughout the year, do they donate to any of your causes? So you want one place of truth for all information pertaining to the customer.
Natalie, just quickly, this is also sometimes called a customer relationship manager or CRM, I believe. And just to be clear, that can scale. Like it could be as simple as an Excel spreadsheet if you are low tech and getting started, but capturing that data for yourself, right up to very sophisticated SaaS solutions that can really cover the full gamut, link out, right? Really sophisticated and expensive as a company grows.
Yes, but not all of these tools are very expensive. And if going back to the value proposition, if you have a big budget line for customer acquisition, this needs to be part of the budget. You need to have, as you say, most companies have CRMs, right? And this is kind of where the terminology of client relationship management derives from. But that is just the tool to house everything. there's no point of having that tool if the right key stakeholders don't have visibility to it. And at some point, even for sole practitioners, having an Excel spreadsheet that doesn't give you metrics from the data that you have in that spreadsheet, which then gives you insights, which is that value add that you want to speak to your customers about, doesn't serve you once you get to a level of sophistication within your organization, right?
100% agree with that. And I also love how, having the CRM, yes, it's data, but you and I both know that data is only as valid as the quality and consistency of the data in. So having a customer relations strategy to make the best use of that tool is often, I think, a piece that gets missed.
Absolutely. And then, to be honest, yes, some of these software tools can be expensive. But again, an organization that's serious about client relations, delivering customer success will invest in them. And if you're going to be putting all this money aside for other things, this is something you can do. The other thing to think about too is that when you get these insights, it actually creates workflows and check-ins, if you will, that are value add. If you see data within your CRM or a plug-in software that gives you insights as to what you need to action, that still comes from the base of the CRM. So, whether it means that you need to have a performance review, whether your system is telling you there's low usage, how about we look at these other data points to try and figure out and determine why. So before you go back to the customer, you can proactively come with a solution to what may be perceived as a joint issue, and or you just have more insights that will allow you to be proactive. So that's just one example. But when you're talking about churn rates and the health of the customer, CRMs will also help you do that. Depending on how you set up the system to give you insights. And one of the old models, dare I say, from customer success is, the red, yellow, green, just like a stoplight. Red means that we're in trouble here. All the data points are saying, if we don't kind of figure out a solution and or reach out to the customer to have a comprehensive conversation around what we can do to get them back in the yellow, to get them back in the green, other terms, detractors, promoters, is also something that people will be familiar with. You want them to be in the promoter realm. You do not want them to be in the detractor, which is the red realm. An Excel spreadsheet is not going to tell you that.
No, it's not. And I'll give you another example. So, because I want to make this a little bit concrete and again, make sure I'm understanding. So, oil change on one of my cars. I've got an electric and I have a gas. And on my gas car, I have asked repeatedly and they've said no. I just want a text reminder when my next oil change is due. And they're like, oh, but we don't know what your mileage is. I'm like, yes, but you know how much time has passed. Just text me. And then I'll call you back and I'll book. But instead, I have to put it in my own calendar or I have to monitor it. It's so trivial, but it would be so helpful. My dentist does it, right?
But I'm sure your dentist doesn't have a manual process. So when you describe that, part of the reason why they can't do it is because manually someone has to go in, check the spreadsheet, see that Brooke came in February. Okay, come now. It's going over 3 months. Someone has to manually do it, which is why investments in customer success or CRM platforms that trigger things once data is entered into it is really in the best interest, not only internally for the efficiency and bandwidth of the staff that you're working with, but also for the customer. And if I could pivot quickly, this
Please.
Is where, when you're starting to move away from manual and getting into more automation is what you're really desiring there as a customer.
Okay, we were going to pivot in the same way, by the way.
Because the segmentation speaks to the type of car you drive, the type of oil that you have, other data points that then gives you the metrics as to when we should reach out to say, come now, you need another oil change. But if you don't have a system that will do that for you, you're still relying on somebody to manually do that. The ideal space for a client relations or a customer success manager is to have access to these tools at certain organizations in order to focus more on the value add and how they can trigger those solutions, opposed to gathering information, which could be very labor intensive just to get the insights, then to action them. So it's not to say that you can't do them with Excel spreadsheets and other tools that are out there. But but it will mean that you have to connect those tools to other tools in order to get those insights. And in many cases, if you're using MS Suite, Google Suite, there is a great family of tools within those suites to help you get there before you can afford, the big budget for some of the other software.
Okay, very cool, very cool. And I love that you've given a more simplified example, right? Very common for many business owners to have a copy of Google Suite and Microsoft Teams, and to be embedded in that. But what I really love is this idea of, and I think it really describes the shift from being a practitioner where you literally use your hands for everything that you do, because oftentimes because you're learning it in the moment, and so you want to be hands-on with it. But eventually you have enough understanding or enough potential to get more understanding to be able to then start automating, which then brings up your level of sophistication. But that automation now means that you can use your hands for the work that you're doing, as opposed to planning and organizing the work that you want to do. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Because a lot of the issues is efficiency for a lot of organizations. So if I use non-for-profits, and what I've been doing recently with some new clients is that, they have lots of donors. They have lots of donors that support various aspects of their initiatives. Instead of someone trying to remember this legacy donor and how much they spent from, 2020 up until today, a lot of the software will be able to segment that information for you. So you already know that year over year, going back to churn, again, non-for-profit, but same philosophy, yep. They're not donating or giving their resources, whether it's monetary or procurement, the way they used to. Why? Right? And once you determine the why, you should then quickly move to solutions around how you can then potentially get them to increase. And there's a whole set of different tactics you can use to do that. But information is king. Information is what brings you into a comprehensive, factual, statistical conversation with the client, and frankly, also internally. So, if I'm being honest here, a lot of my challenges are not with my clients' customers. It's with the client understanding what needs to be done internally, so they can give their internal teams more space to do the value add work.
Now, I'll tell you why I really love the direction you pivoted us into is for two reasons. One, oftentimes we think about talking to the client and we think about our messaging, and we tend to focus on our messaging to the client. And so it's this is what I'm great at, or this is what I can do for you. And being able to flip that in reverse and almost asking, what does the client need? What is their anxiousness? What is their desire in this moment? And then how do I address that?
This is why I love onboarding. And I'm still so dumbfounded, Brooke, by how many organizations don't do onboarding. Again, it doesn't matter what business sector you're in. In retail, if I remember my retails, they used to call it the kickoff call. In SaaS companies, it's the training session. It's all the same. But you want to start off with asking questions before, as you put it, you kind of presumptuously start getting into what you can deliver and what you can do without having real foresight as to what you deliver, how does it fit with the client's needs and goals? And probably more importantly for certain industries, how they want that fulfillment to unfold, right? Yep. So, everybody has their process flows. This is how we do, and this is what we do next. And sometimes that's not always the appropriate fit. Now, no one's suggesting that you need to change your whole fulfillment process for maybe one or two customers. But again, with insights, if you see over time that what your model looks like doesn't actually fulfill the desired outcomes of your client base, that gives you pause and you can revisit that. And sometimes it's a couple of tweaks, like a handoff meeting. When I get on a call with the client, I really don't know certain things that I should know. That could be fixed by having a comprehensive conversation with the sales leader. If you're in SaaS and you have a rollout team doing the fulfillment around technology, what can a customer success manager do to ease the customer into that process, to alleviate the anxiety of, okay, what are they going to ask me for? What do I got to do next? Do I need to have my IT person involved, marketing? A lot of what, we do is kind of common sense in terms of communication, right? Before I came on this call with you, you said, Natalie, this is what you can expect. This is what we're going to talk about. That helped me feel more prepared about this call. Is that value add for me? Absolutely. And even post, which you also did brilliantly. That's what I do in every day. After you have a conversation with the rollout team, with the retail team, with the merchandising team, this is what you can expect next. That makes the customer generally feel like you're a trusted advisor again and that they can trust what you say you're going to do.
Oh, I love that. I love it. Well, thanks for the positive feedback.
But you know, you're great.
Oh, thank you, my friend. I I can't believe how quickly time has gone for us. I've really loved this conversation. I feel like we need to dig more into it as well. But at this point, do you have any final words of wisdom that you want to share with people who are really looking at client retention as their strategy to continue to build out their business?
Now I know a lot of people hear what I do and they're like, this is so niche, I don't get it. So let me in fact simplify it.
Please.
If you want to keep the customers you have and not go back to the drawing board, you know, think about implementing a customer relations program within your, current apparatus, or adapting customer success best practices. What that means is proactively thinking about what the customer wants to achieve through your whole fulfillment process. You may have a direct way of selling things, but it's always easier to modify the fulfillment process. You want to start with the customer and work back. Don't start with your own objectives and then wonder why the customer doesn't always get their desired outcomes. Put yourself in the customer's shoes to think about what they are trying to achieve, and that will tell you everything you need to know about how you should do the fulfillment.
That's perfect description. I love it. Thank you so much for your time today. Again, joining us has been Natalie Williams from the Esteem Agency, talking about client success and client relations management. My name's Brooke Gordon. I'm your host of Best for Women Live. Join us again next Monday. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Brooke.